The Whispering Forest. In a peaceful valley surrounded by mountains, there was a large and ancient forest known as the Whispering Forest. The trees in this forest were tall and strong, with leaves that danced in the wind and branches that reached high into the sky. The forest had stood for hundreds of years, and it was home to many different animals, birds, and insects. The trees themselves were special, for they could communicate with each other in a language of whispers carried by the wind. The oldest tree in the forest was a great oak named Wise. Wise had seen many seasons come and go, and he knew the stories of the forest better than anyone. His roots were deep in the earth, and his branches stretched wide, providing shade for the animals that lived below. Wise was respected by all the trees and creatures in the forest, for he was wise indeed, and he cared deeply for the well-being of the forest. One warm summer day, the trees were talking quietly among themselves. The forest was calm, with birds singing and the sound of a nearby stream flowing gently. But the trees could sense that something was wrong. They had noticed that the summers were getting hotter, and the rains were becoming less frequent. The trees were worried that the forest might be in danger. "Wise," said a young maple tree named Leaf, "I feel something is changing. The sun is hotter than before, and I am thirsty more often. What is happening to our forest?" Wise sighed softly, his leaves rustling as he thought. "Yes, Leaf, I have felt it too. The climate is changing, and it is affecting our forest. We must be careful, for if the drought continues, it could bring harm to us and all who live here." The other trees listened carefully to Wise's words. They were all concerned about the changes they had noticed. The pine trees, the birch trees, and even the small shrubs that grew in the shadows all felt the effects of the drier weather. The once lush forest was starting to dry out, and some of the younger trees were struggling to grow. "What can we do?" asked a tall pine tree named Needle. "We need water to survive, but the rain is not coming as it used to." Wise thought for a moment, his old bark creaking as he swayed slightly in the breeze. "We must work together," he said. "We must help each other conserve the water we have and protect the forest. We must also find a way to store water for the times when the rain does not come." The trees murmured in agreement. They knew that Wise was right. The survival of the forest depended on their ability to adapt to the changing conditions. They decided to gather the different trees and plants to discuss how they could protect their home. The meeting was held in a large clearing where the sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating a warm and inviting space. Trees from all corners of the forest attended, each bringing their own concerns and ideas. The animals, too, gathered around, for they relied on the trees for food and shelter, and they were just as worried about the future. The first to speak was a tall birch tree named White. "We must reduce the amount of water we use," White said. "We can try to grow deeper roots to reach water that is buried in the earth. This will help us survive when the surface water is scarce." The other trees nodded in agreement. Growing deeper roots was a good idea, but it would take time and effort. A small willow tree named Weep spoke next. "We should share our water," she suggested. Those of us who have access to water should help those who are struggling. We can connect our roots underground and pass water to those in need. This idea was met with approval, for the trees understood that by helping each other, they could all survive the drought. As the meeting continued, the trees discussed many other ideas. The oak trees offered to provide shade for the younger trees, protecting them from the harsh sun. The pine trees, with their long needles, suggested that they could catch and store rainwater when it did fall, saving it for later use. The shrubs and smaller plants promised to protect the forest floor, preventing the soil from drying out and blowing away. The animals, too, offered to help. The birds agreed to spread the seeds of the trees far and wide, helping new trees grow in areas where there was still water. The insects, especially the bees, promised to continue pollinating the flowers, ensuring that the trees could produce fruit and seeds for the future. Wise listened to all the ideas and felt proud of the forest's inhabitants. "We are stronger together," he said. "If we work as one, we can protect our home and ensure that the Whispering Forest continues to thrive." As the meeting ended, the trees and animals returned to their places in the forest, ready to begin the hard work of preparing for the changing climate. The trees stretched their roots deeper into the earth, searching for water that was hidden far below. They shared the water they found with each other, ensuring that no tree was left thirsty. The animals did their part as well, helping the trees in any way they could. The summer continued to be hot and dry, but the forest remained strong. The trees worked together, sharing water and protecting each other from the harsh sun. The Whispering Forest, though changed, was still a place of life and beauty. The trees whispered to each other in the wind, their leaves rustling as they shared stories and comforted each other. One day, as the sun began to set and the sky turned a soft shade of pink, Wise spoke to Leaf, who had grown stronger despite the drought. "Remember, Leaf," Wise said, "the strength of the forest comes from our unity. Alone, we might struggle, but together, we can face any challenge. The Whispering Forest will survive because we care for each other." Leaf nodded, his green leaves shining in the fading light. He understood now the importance of working together, not just for his own survival, but for the survival of the entire forest. The resilient forest, the trees of the Whispering Forest continued to work together as the hot summer days passed. Each tree did its part to help the forest survive. The oak trees provided shade, the pines stored rainwater in their needles, and the willows shared water through their deep roots. The animals played their role too, spreading seeds and pollinating flowers. Despite the ongoing drought, the forest remained strong. The trees supported each other, and this unity kept them alive. The animals noticed that the trees were not only surviving, but also beginning to thrive. The birds sang songs of hope, and the insects buzzed with energy, filling the forest with life. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Wise the Oak spoke to the forest. "We have faced a great challenge," he said, his voice calm and steady. "But by working together, we have shown that we can overcome even the hardest times. The Whispering Forest is still alive because we cared for each other. As the season changed, small clouds began to appear in the sky. The trees, who had grown used to the dry weather, were hopeful but cautious. Finally, one day, the rain returned. It started with a light drizzle, and soon it became a steady downpour. The forest soaked up the rain, its thirst finally quenched. The rivers began to flow again, and the leaves of the trees turned a vibrant green. The Whispering Forest had survived the drought, not because of any single tree, but because of the strength they found in their unity. The trees whispered to each other in the wind, their voices filled with gratitude and joy. The animals rejoiced, knowing that their home was safe once more. Wise looked out over the forest, his heart full of pride. "This forest will continue to stand tall," he said to Leaf, who had grown strong and healthy. "Because we learned to work together, we have ensured the future of the Whispering Forest." And so, the Whispering Forest remained a place of beauty and life, a testament to the power of unity and cooperation. The trees continued to whisper their stories to the wind, knowing that as long as they stood together, they could face any challenge that came their way. This part highlights how the Whispering Forest survived the drought through unity and cooperation. The return of the rain symbolizes the reward of their collective efforts, showing that together they can overcome any hardship